about like the last year or so that I had a co-host, I was really struggling. And I was like, my mom kept being like, I need to be your mom. I can't be your therapist. Like you need to talk to someone. And that was when I finally, so that was about like 25, 24. And I finally was like, okay, I'm just going to get a therapist. And it was in New York City, and I would go in person with her. And that it felt very, at first it felt very like, why am I here? Like, I don't need this. But then eventually it like cracked, and it was really helpful. But it was not easy. I will say, I think a lot of people think therapy is like, sit down and tell your secrets. Like, it's so awkward at first if you're not, even I had a psychologist as a mother, and I'm still like, I don't want to do this. But I think it's all in your head, because once you open the floodgates, they never close.
You were struggling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are you asking me with what?
Yeah. You said you were struggling. So you were probably, from what you said, you were going to your mother and explaining that there was a struggle. That struggle, is that a social struggle with a friend, or is that a psychological struggle? Or
I think in business, there was a lot happening where I was living with someone I was doing business with. We were struggling with business. Like, there were so many things happening, and I was, how do I say this? I was struggling to take care of myself in an environment that was really unhealthy, and was like, the show was priority, but behind the scenes, it was a disaster. And so I was like compromising on a lot of things that like morally I didn't agree with, or mentally I wasn't feeling good about. And it was at a really weird time, because Call Her Daddy was like the biggest show ever. And everyone was like, these girls are the best, and they're the best of friends, and they're the best. And like, that's life. Like, it's almost like how everyone talks about like Instagram, we put our best foot forward, and it was all crumbling behind the scenes. And it was terrifying to me, because I worked my whole life to like get to a point like this where I'm producing a show, and it just felt very scary to me that I didn't have control of all the aspects going on.
And the symptoms were psychological for you?
Psychological. I was basically in a codependent relationship. Like, it was so unhealthy for both of us. And I think psychologically, yes. I even think physically it was taking a toll on me. And then it was also taking a toll on my other relationships, because like the partner I had at the time was like bearing the weight of me complaining about so much going on in my life, because I couldn't go at the person that I had to get up every morning with and record, right? Like, I couldn't be, I had to keep the show going. So it was like very detrimental to, yes, psychologically and my like mental health. Like, the show came first before I think both of our personal needs.
What was the advice you needed most at that moment but didn't get? Or maybe just before that moment happened? Because that's kind of like, that's when things start falling.
Yeah.
But if you'd got advice maybe a couple of years earlier, it would have prevented you getting into that situation. So what is that advice that, and I'm saying this because of, there's someone at home now who's, you know, they want to follow in your footsteps in whatever career or industry it might be. But when you get into business and things start going well, you just fucking wish that someone had told you.
I mean, maybe that it's okay to leave. It's okay to leave a situation for both people involved. It's okay to want to hold on to something, because in some aspects it's really working. But if you are compromising your morals and your mental health, and at one point your sanity, like, it ain't worth it. But again, I think like, even if someone had told me that, I had to live through it, because I worked my whole life for this. Like, I finally got the show, and I was producing, and I was doing what I loved, but I then started to hate it. And that to me was when I was like, I didn't need anyone to tell me at that point that I should leave. It was like, oh, I've loved this my whole life. Something's off. Like if I'm this miserable, there's a better way.
From that, you must have learned the factors that need to be in place professionally for you to love work, because you got to experience head on all the factors that make a passion turn into misery. So on the flip side, what are the factors that you need and you believe people generally need for them to like love their work?
Yeah. I think that the first thing is like business is there's so many different layers. It's so complicated, even if it's just you. So then add another person in. It's almost impossible. And I think like it was so difficult. My partner and I at the time had such different wants, such different, envisionments for our career in the future. And that is so okay. But I think the issue is like, if you have the ability to sit down before you begin, which we didn't really have. Like I remember I came home one day, or she came home from work one day. She was the third roommate to me and my best friend from childhood. We had met her, like it was like a very random, like, hey, we need a third. Do you want to come live with us? We'd lived together for like a couple months, if that. And I was like, do you want to do this podcast with me? I had no idea it was going to be the biggest podcast in the world. I had no idea her wants and what truly she was interested in, what she was passionate about. We were passionate about such different things. So it's like, I think in business, you do have to actually believe that this could become the biggest thing. You have to put your mind there. And one, that's incredible for your self-confidence to be like, if you're starting a business, pretend it's about to be Apple. Envision and who you're sitting next to. Do you want to be there with them? Or for yourself, are you willing to get there and sacrifice certain things in your personal life to get there? Like whether it's a duo or a singular person, like you actually have to envision yourself at the end line and at your goal, because you have to mentally start to function that way, because then all of a sudden you could get there. And then you're like, oh, fuck, I didn't plan for this. And I think that's kind of what we both felt. We were like, we don't even really know each other. 3 episodes in, this is the biggest show in the world. Like we're drinking buddies. Like what? This is not supposed to be a business, and we are way in over our heads. And I think that's okay. But I look back and I'm like, I had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. But I do think in business, it's like, you got to think big, because once you get there, you better be prepared. And I wasn't.
There's an interesting point here, though, about being a people pleaser. When a people pleaser strikes it big, it's hard to like put up those boundaries and start like saying what you want and what you need, and having, because even the conversation we had a while ago about aligning and communicating what you want from the jump so that further down the line you don't mess things up and regret it, requires a difficult conversation at the start.
Yeah, I wasn't even like aware of how much I was people pleasing until it got to that breaking point where I was like, there were so many things I was doing to appease people around me to keep the show going that was so unhealthy that now I have, in hindsight, I'm like, what was I doing? Why was I like getting people out of bed? Like, why was I like managing like drugs and alcohol and like trying to be this like fixer? And then it's like just trying to put a show on. I think I was like a little over my skis. I just said that because I was skiing this weekend. So that's the only analogy. I'm like over my head. I'm like over my skis. You can get down a really, really dark path if you do have a goal in order to get there. And that is also advice I give people of like, it's not worth losing yourself to get the prize, because what was hard for me is like public perception. So I've talked to you about how much I care about people liking me. Now I'm on a world stage and there's comments and there's people, and there was like a public fallout with a woman. So there's like, someone's going to be the victim and someone's going to be the villain. And I was the villain. And I'm like, how did this happen? Like, to me, I think publicly, I struggled so much for a while of like wanting to tell the full story and wanting to tell the truth and be like, I promise, like, but I'm also then like, my character was like, I don't think anyone needs to know what happened behind closed doors and how dark it got. But I just know that I was proud of myself that I know I'm a good person. But when you see the internet picking sides or doing this, like, it fucks with you. And I imagine for her, it fucked with her. Like, it was really hard, I think, for two women to go through something so big in a COVID pandemic, that people just wanted drama. But I think my people-pleasing tendencies of like, wait, why are these people thinking something that I'm not, that ate me alive inside. And I had to have my boyfriend, my mother, my father, my therapist be like, you both know the real story. That's it. That's all you need to know. And so I think it took me a while though, where I was like, I want to clear the air. Like, how many times are we going to go back and forth? Like, you know what I mean? But it can get exhausting trying to make people know your character and who you are. Especially when I've been talking on the internet for almost now 5 years. Like, people have a perception of me, and that's something I have to live with and be okay with, but it's hard.
I remember someone wrote in the Diary of a CEO, this little book that I have in front of me. Guests, when they leave, they write a question for the next guest. Someone wrote in this book, if today were your last day and you had to have a 60-second conversation with someone in your life, what would you say to them and why? And I was just wondering, as you're saying all of this was clearly a really tumultuous, pivotal moment in your life, for better and for worse in many respects. Are there any words unsaid? If today were your last day and I slid you a phone and said, you're going to have a conversation with that person, your former partner, would you dial the number? Would you say anything?
No, because I think in a weird way, like, when there's time, I think both sides, and I acknowledge both sides have their own story that then just keeps going on. Like, I'm like, what even is the reality anymore? We both have such different storylines of everything that happened. If I was like forced to, I would just say like, I hope you're healthy and you're well. But I think we're both like in a beautiful way. I said this to someone recently. I was like, it's so much better that we're both doing our own things. Like, that's the same thing in like romantic relationships. Like, I think a lot of times you try to keep making something work. It shouldn't be that difficult. It really shouldn't. If it's meant to work, it will be working. And I'm in the healthiest relationship of my life right now. And I'm like, this feels great. This is what it's supposed to feel like. So no, I don't think that I would pick up the phone, because I think we see things very differently, and that's okay. That's life. Like, that's the world. That's politics. That's religion. That's friendships ending. That's marriages ending. Like, you're just going to be like, I don't see it like you. And that's okay. I think the internet's probably a little bit more invested than even the two of us are. But yeah, I think that would be just, I hope you're healthy.